Hi, this is Ruvain Spolter from the Mishnah Project. It's right after Rosh Hashanah, Tafshin Pei Aleph, and we're about a third of the way through Masechet Keilim. And I want to share with you just a couple of thoughts about Masechet Keilim and Corona and the learning that we've been doing until now. So I don't know if you've noticed, but Masechet Keilim is really, really long. If you haven't noticed, you should notice by now, it has 30 prakim, 30 chapters, which is incredibly long. And I don't know if you've also noticed, but it struck me just how specifically detailed Masechet Keilim is. How specific, how careful it is, meaning more than a lot of other Mishnayot. So let's say if you would compare the Mishnah in Sukkah about Arba Minim, and then you would compare the Mishnah in Keilim about, let's say, what kind of metal Keilim, what kind of metal utensils are Mekabel Tumah. So you have like a whole list of like the helmet of a soldier, and then his cheek guards, and that's just today's Mishnah. And you start to think to yourself that these Mishnayot seem very, I would say, different in their content, in their depth. How come when it comes to Arba Minim, there's like one Mishnah about Etrog, whereas when it comes to Keilim and Tum'ah, the Mishnah is incredibly, incredibly specific. So I want to make a suggestion, and I think this might have ramifications for us nowadays as well, especially in light of Corona and the new year. So it seems to me that in any particular era, religions, Judaism, has specific focuses. I think when I think about this, I think about that in the time of Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen of Radin, he felt that people were not focusing enough on Shmirat HaLashon, on Lashon Hara. And he wrote a whole book, he wrote a bunch of books about it. And nowadays there's a whole play, not to speak, there's a whole thing, like maybe it took 100 years, but people are very careful, they try to be better about not speaking Lashon Hara. And so we have specific focuses that we focus on at a given time or a given era. Religions are like that. You can't focus everything, it'd be nice to do 100% everything all the time, but it's just not like that. And reading the Mishnayot, I get the sense, very interestingly, that when you read about Tumah and Tahara, Kachim and Tarot, when I'm learning all these Mishnayot, it's long. There's a lot of it. And one gets a sense that when there was a Beit HaMikdash and people really had to be careful about Tumah and Tahara, that was one of the main focuses of their religious expression. That was what they were very careful about. That was what they cared about. That was what they were involved in. What about other things? It's impossible to know. But just look at the length of the Mishnayot and the specificity of the Mishnayot about Keilim, as opposed to the specificity of Mishnayot about Shabbat, for example. There's a lot of Mishnayot about Shabbat, not very much about the Malachot. Really, very, very interesting. And I think what's really interesting is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote these Mishnayot after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. But one gets the sense that he was trying to record a religious experience that we no longer have, and that he hadn't been around for 150 years. It was just gone, but he wanted to record it for us to understand. And I think what's important to understand is that religious emphasis and focus, to me, shifts over time. We didn't used to be careful about Lashon Hara, we're careful today. We used to be extremely careful about sacrifices and ritual purity. Nowadays, you don't know, is my yarmulke tameh, or can it be mekabel tumah, or is this book tameh? I have no idea, I don't care. It's just not part of my life. I don't care, I don't bring korbanot. So it just makes you think about how life shifts, how things shift. And I start to think today, here you are watching a Mishnah video over the internet. And many of us, we davened on Rosh Hashanah, I davened outside. Not in shul, but with a small community on the street. And I started to think to myself, with this era, with this pandemic, with this age, as time shifts, are we seeing a shift as well in the way we used to observe and we used to teach and we used to learn, as opposed to the way we're going to do it? It's going to be different in the future. If things are changing, how is Judaism doesn't change, i.e. the halakha doesn't change, but it shifts, our focus and emphasis shifts over time. And that's just something I noticed about when I studied Mishnah Yomit, and I think it's something we really need to think about more specifically. So you could say, well, Corona is quick and it'll go away. The larger shift, I think, obviously, is the creation of the State of Israel, the creation of a Jewish identity that's separate from specifically a religious identity. How will that affect observance of halakha? How will that affect Jewish identity, national identity, who it is that I am and what it is that I do? So just things to think about as we enter the year, Tafshin Pei Aleph, and continue to study Masechet Keilim. I wish you a good year, a happy year. It should be a healthy year for all of us. And I wish you to continue to study with me on the Mishnah Project. Make it a great year.